So I recently got a DM on Instagram from Ryan Lewis, and he was curious about the Holga, so I figured I would address that today. And Ryan writes, with the Holga, you're completely locked in to the camera's 1/100th of a second, and a choice of one of two f-stops. So how are you ending up with the photos with such contrast and depth? Thank you. How are you ending up with images that aren't too blown out or too dark? Are you using filters? Well, that's a great question. I'll set that there. Thanks, Ryan, for writing. And I'll answer your last question first with filters. I did experiment a little bit with filters, but ultimately I decided to stop trying because the results were too inconsistent and the look was a little too strong at times. And I think ultimately what I decided was that it took away from the spirit of the Holga, because it is such a limited camera with one shutter speed and two f-stops. I figured it would be best to just not fight that flow and just let the Holga be a Holga. So I did initially add a step-up ring from 46 to 52, since I do have quite a bit of 52 millimeter filters for the 4x5. The 46 millimeter portion sits in the flange of the lens, but it needed to be super glued, and that super glue ended up melting some of the plastic. So it does look unique, but it does hold a filter. So if you do want to play with filters, you could get a 46 to 52 millimeter step-up ring and super glue, hot glue, just to secure it. The other modification that I've made to the Holga is gaff tape. So a roll of gaff tape will cost you about half as much as this camera costs, but you can get a lot of usages out of gaff tape, so it's always good to have some of that around. But I think the appropriate thing to do with the Holgas to get as much contrast out of the image that you can is to eliminate as much of the light leaks as you can, because these are notorious for leaking light, as you probably know. So you'll see that this camera has been completely mummified with gaff tape, and I've even got the back film sealed off, and when I want to change the film I just peel that off, put a new roll of film in, and then use that same piece of tape over the top. As long as you're not getting like dirt and dust and stuff on the sticky part of the gaff tape, it'll re-adhere itself many times. And then I just proceeded to seal up every possible place that I could on the Holga that seemed like it might leak light into the camera. So I shot a test roll with this before I went on a big trip with Jen, and it's a good thing that I did, because there's a few discoveries that I made about this particular Holga. And one of the major discoveries was when I shot it in f8, or I believe it's covered in tape now, but I believe it's the shade setting, which is like the f8. It was leaking light through the shutter release button. So when I would pull the shutter release button down, light was streaming in through the side, and it would come across the negative as burnt in. But that led me to locking this thing down at f16. And I find that when I'm using the Holga, typically it's in midday sun, and having this thing locked in at f16 gives me the best contrast, the best overall rendering of the image. And I try to accentuate that by shooting everything right down the barrel. So I don't get fancy with compositions. I try to find one specific object that draws my attention, and then I try to make that the center of the frame, just to make sure that any weird fall off, any weird lens aberrations, etc., are being compensated for. You're gonna get the best rendering of the lens dead center. Hopefully, it is a Holga, so you might not know until you shoot a roll through your Holga. So each one is different. From what I hear, this is the only one I own. But people tell me, and I've read that each one's unique. So you have to figure out what's unique about yours and figure out what you want to do to achieve the look that you're going for. So I figured I'd show you a short slideshow of some of my favorite Holga images from the past couple of years. All of them were shot with the aforementioned techniques. Locked in at f16, you're locked into that shutter speed. Look at the object and click the frame, move along. So yeah, thank you for the question, Ryan, and I hope that that answers a few things for you. If you guys have any questions, not only about Holgas, but any of the cameras that you use or I use or techniques that I use, go ahead and shoot me a DM on Instagram. It's at Chris Swartwood. There's a link in the description. But anywho, thanks Ryan for the question. I hope that that clarifies a few things, and feel free to tag me in some of the images that you get from yours, because I'd love to see those. So thanks very much, and see you in the next one.